Welcome, everybody, to this, our second installment of the MetaShift series. And today we are going to be talking about some of the changes that have come with an end of March patch. Again, as per usual, we have two very special guests with us on the show this week because we can't get enough of him. We have the scientist back with us. Welcome. And we have the one and only yelling Spanish guy from YouTube.
Yeah,
Mogwai.
I promise you could get enough of me. Yeah.
Welcome
How's
to
it
the
going,
show,
guys? I'm
guys.
really excited to be here, by the way. I just want to point that out. Really pumped, really pumped. I've been watching these videos, ever since the first one, so I'm happy
And
to be.
we're hoping to continue making some
For sure.
content that the community finds enriching, and we're trying to stimulate discussion. So we're always trying to get people on who are opinionated and ready to provoke dialogue from the community. So, okay, without much further ado, we're going to get straight into our discussions for today. The first thing we want to hear from you guys is your first impressions when you first saw the patch notes, the long-delayed soon TM patch notes that finally came out yesterday. We'll start with you, Mogwai.
All
What were
right,
your
let's start
first
with me.
impressions?
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty safe to assume that I freaked out quite a bit. I yelled numerous times, and at first I was kind of shocked because I knew something big was going to happen. We all knew that. We all knew something regarding the rule was going to change, and that was going to have a big impact on the game. When I realized all those changes, when I saw all the card changes, and I saw the rule change, I freaked out. I completely because it leads to a very different game. It's something that everybody has pretty much noticed. Like especially if you played today, for example, it's just completely different. Like there's a lot of value all of a sudden matters so much. So when I just saw all these changes, I was just freaking out. I actually did not freak out as much as I normally do, but I went through a phase in which I was just kind of in shock because I was kind of like, shit, this means that this happens. This means that this card this that. I was losing it, dude. I was. That's basically me. Like that's all you're gonna get from me in that regard. Like I just screamed a lot, just freaked out, and here I'm still here, but I'm still very excited about the game. But yeah,
I don't think
that's
you were the only person that had that kind of reaction. I'm sure there were quite a few players that saw those patch
it's
notes and thought, "What just happened?"
it's crazy.
Uh, Scientist, how about you? What were your first impressions when the notes finally came out?
Oh, well, I mean, I didn't see this coming at all. This was such a massive change just across the board. So many different aspects that I'm basically willing to say that it's an entirely new game. Um, and I'm trying to approach it that way, to think, not to compare it so much to the old Duelist, but to take it on its own merits. And it still has things like the replace mechanic. It still has things like the board, where positioning matter, and there are interesting cards like backstab, flying, blast, these sorts of things that you don't see in other games. Which to me, so maybe a lot of the older players are used to these things, but I'm trying to appreciate them for what they are, irrespective of what old Duelist was. So I'm very surprised that it's a new game with still a lot of features that I love. So I'm looking forward to trying it out really.
Nangard, how about you?
Yeah, as Scientist said, it's basically a new game, and it will be a new experience for every player playing the game, because everything is so different. Right now you're no one's sure what to expect to face on ladder, and it's kind of exciting, and everyone will have to test on his own to find what's good again, and that on its own is kind of exciting.
Yeah, I must say, I think my reaction started off being similar to Mogwai's with a lot of yelling and walking around in my room wondering what now, and then it shifted gradually to something closer to Scientist and Anger's opinion, where
Yeah.
I was just thinking, oh man, this is, for all practical purposes, it's kind of a new game, and in a sense, you need to approach it that way. We're going to get into some reactions that other people had about the patch, and there's some frustration as you would expect, but I think it's due in part to the fact that people are not ready to just immediately look at it as, okay, I got to look at it with like a fresh pair of eyes. Think about it almost as a new game entirely, although it still has those core characteristics that drew us to Duelyst in the first place, right? So yeah, definitely some mixed responses, but I think that excitement generally overrode the negative feelings that there may have been.
For sure.
And there had been a great amount of apprehension that had built up in the 10 days or so prior to them actually releasing these notes. So, okay, let's get right
mixed
into
responses
it.
for sure. I just want to jump in. Mixed responses for sure.
Yeah.
But I saw more people playing this game than I, ever had since I've been a part of it. Yet last night, I think I had like 100 friends online just in the game, and almost the same this morning as well. So,
Yeah. It's
plus or minus, people are excited.
It's like, I think it's very important to say that it's very normal for people to be very upset. Like, I knew that no matter what they announced the new rule, like no matter what the new rule is going to be, people were going to. There's going to be a large portion of people who just do not like change. They don't want their game to change, and they get really upset. They're very vocal too, and sometimes you think that they're the majority because they're the ones speaking, but I think that facts speaks for themselves, and the fact that scientist says he has 100 because he has a bunch of friends. Apparently, I deleted a lot of my friends there because I would get spammed. So I only got. But today I had like an insane amount of number of people. I was like, I didn't know I had this many people added. It was, I had like 30 people, and like, oh no, what is happening? Because I've never gone up. Like, my friend list is made in a sense that I never go up from like 10, 11. On a good day, 12, but fucking 30, like that was insane. Like, I obviously people were very hyped, they were very anxious to play, but I think a lot of people are very excited about these new changes and such. And even though there's going to be a lot of negative voices, and there are going to be a lot of people who say, "Oh, Duelyst is dead now, Duelyst is gone." People on Reddit will also say stuff like that because there's a lot of there's always negativity with change. But I'm very positive about everything, more than I was at the beginning, personally. So yeah.
Okay, so let's get right into it then and have a look at what these core changes were, and then we're going to discuss how one has to adjust your mindset, your conceptual approach to both playing the game and deck building itself. So the actual changes that we had to the core rule set, there are two. Okay, before, you had a 3-card opening hand where you had the opportunity to mulligan away all of your cards and get all 3 of them back. That has now been changed. You now have a 5-card opening hand with the opportunity to mulligan away 2 of those cards. The other big change, and this is really the sticky point, right? It's been changed from being able to draw 2 cards at the end of your turn, every turn, to drawing 1 card at the end of your turn. Okay, let's start with Mogwai here. How do you think this affects one's mindset when playing the game? How do you adjust your mindset going into actually executing the plays and building decks? Where has this patch had the greatest influence in both of those domains?
I think this is a very, very good question, and a lot of people won't realize how good of a question it is, because it's your mindset, your goal to win. I think it changes a lot now, because when you played before, Duelyst was kind of was a very action-packed, very fast game in which you were constantly replacing your hand, and you were constantly playing you wanted to make sure that you made the maximum use you could out of your hand, basically. So you wanted to be able to chain cards, and you wanted to make sure that you always drew 2 cards, so you were not losing value. And tempo is it's always been very important, but it was very, very important, and that changes completely. Like, I had an idea, a very vague idea of how this game would be when I saw that rule, because I used to run a Vitruvian deck with Spelljammer and Mogwai. The concept of the deck was a fun deck, it worked sometimes. The concept was to utilize Spelljammer to nullify the card draw, and then use Mogwai on your behalf to just refill your hand and such, and have advantage over your opponent. Now the thing is, it's funny because whenever I drop Spelljammer, I got the feeling that I got when we play the game now, and it felt very oppressive at first. You know, when I use this deck and we both drew 2 cards, I had to be very careful when I dropped Spelljammer, because all of a sudden I was drawing 1 card, and every single play I made was like, it kind of mattered a lot more in the sense that I had to make sure that I was keeping stuff for later, because I would run out of options really quick. And that's what's happening now. I think the approach now is something that I've only been playing for a day, nonstop, but for a day. So,
Yeah.
I got the impression that that's like, my mindset has changed completely in that regard. Like, I want to play now I want to preserve a lot of cards, and it's also the opening with 5 cards in your hands is also like, it's very impactful, and it leads to a lot of change too. It will lead to a lot of change when it comes to deck building and such, because you have a lot more combos available earlier on in the game, and because of the fact that your hand starts off so big, you know what I mean. But then again, later on, that also leads to a false sense of security, and I think that's the biggest thing that has impacted me with this change. Something that I've actually, I find it funny, you know, when I realized it happened. I would start off with 5 cards in my hands. I knew I would draw 1 card, but I would get really comfortable. I would just sit down and, you know, I wouldn't relax too much, because I'd be like, I got a lot of hands right off the bat. Damn. Life is great. And then all of a sudden, you got 1 card in your hand, and you got nothing. Like, you ran out of everything. I saw this dude utilize a Kaido Assassin, Inner Focus, Mist Dragon Seal just to get 4 damage on me. And I'm like, you are going to regret that. Brad, you're going to regret
In 2
that.
turns from now, buddy, you're top decking for the rest of the game.
Yeah. Spoilers, he regretted it. He lost. I won.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I gotta say really, like, regarding that. I think it's definitely very different, but for one, I can't speak for everybody, but for one, I like it. I like that value has an importance now. I like that you gain something from, you know, cards like Science Second Wish, and the fact that, you know, card draw is important, the fact that you really have to be careful what you use, and you gotta preserve certain things, and I think I like that. I like playing like that. I've always played like that, really. I've always kept value really into my, but it never really had that much of an impact as it does now. So yeah, I think that's the big difference.
Do you perhaps have any tips or any advice for newer players? I mean, we know the community knows that you're really passionate about trying to help out newer players. Is there anything that you'd like to say that you might want them to think about as they approach this new phase of Duelyst?
If you can't play, then teach, right? No, but really, like, when it comes to I think I have some key advice, really, like, for newer players. Like, be wary of big minions. First of all, don't play all your cards immediately, because it will lead to frustrating scenarios, because you're gonna drop all your stuff. You're gonna play a lot of 2-drops, for example, like you used to, and then you're gonna realize that you run out of options, and then your opponent's gonna drop a Dancing Blades, and a mere 4/6 is gonna prove to be so hard for you to take down. You know, like, be wary of big minions, and be wary of preserving removal, and be very wary of card advantage. Every single time you make a play, if you're going to eliminate a certain minion, try to not lose card advantage in the process. Like I said, I go back to this example. This guy, Kaido Assassin, Inner Focus, Mist Dragon Sealed into a minion of mine to backstab it. He killed my minion, but he wasted 2 cards in the process. I don't think that's a good play. Like, I don't think that's I would preserve Inner Focus for other scenarios later on, because especially in this meta now, you need to preserve that kind of stuff, because you're gonna run out of cards. So I think that the biggest advice I can give new players is to just preserve shit. Just preserve stuff all the time, and worry about the big things. Big things are spooky. Kill them if you can. That's it.
I think it's some pretty solid advice. Speaking about value, just like in Hearthstone, I think Duelyst has its own mayor of Value Town, and his name is Scientist. So, Scientist, we know you are all about the value. You've always been about the value. So, how do you think the player's conceptual approach to playing and deck building with the new phase of Duelyst should be done? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to. That is how I'm approaching the game at the moment, as I'm sort of learning it organically again. I'm recalibrating my values on all the important features that I had sort of tried to optimize over time in the game: healing, dispel, single target removal, you know, stats, tempo. These are all sort of aspects that had after lots and lots of games, had sort of found an optimal build where you need just this much healing, you need this much, tempo, you need this much out of hand damage to be able to have reliable win conditions against every other very good deck. Off the bat, I'm immediately seeing that healing is probably going up in value, and single target removal is going to be the most important aspect and the biggest skill component, I think, to what the game is eventually going to be. You see, and I'll get into some specifics here. So you see, martyrdom has been changed. You see, Hailstone Prison has sort of indirectly taken a change. Ritual Banishing, Onyx Bear Seal. These are all, and then some more direct removal like Lasting Judgment, Phoenix Fire. These sorts of things need to be used very, very carefully. Because as if you are reaching later stages of the game, you're only going to see, so like let's say the game ends at like what would be 11 mana, right? So if you compare that to the previous version of Duelyst, you're going to end up having seen, so you get like 2 more from the beginning, and then you go, we'll say like 8 turns, you end up seeing actually 6 less cards that whole game. So that means you're probably going to see a lot less really important single target removal that allowed you to sort of, make a tempo push at one point and then go for lethal by sort of giving them too many things to try and deal with. Imagine a vanar where, they suddenly drop one big minion, you go Hailstone, and then you jump a couple 2s and you threaten a Razorback lethal the rest of the game. That sort of thing. You can't quite do that anymore, because if you use a Hailstone and you aren't able to, reasonably quickly finish off the opponent, that Hailstone is going to end up like really biting you. Because you just gave them an extra card. You basically like 2 for 0'd yourself in a sense.
Yeah.
So choosing how to be really, really selective with your removal, like the timing of it, when to hold it, when to start, pushing for damage versus trading. I think that's going to be the focus of the skill component of the game moving forward.
Do you have any specific advice for, say, more advanced players who have been playing the game for a long time and who are now also trying to forge new decks in this new environment? You got any good tips?
Tell us.
Yes. Have an open mind to have an open mind to a lot of cards that that myself and I'm sure a lot of other people had sort of dismissed as not being good because they were just a little bit too easy to remove. I'm going to give some like mediocre examples and some very good examples. So something like White Widow now, because you don't want to spend removal on a 3/4 because removal is going to end up being really, really valuable. That can actually present sort of a very long-term threat. Something like Sworn Avenger, it happens to have that 3 health, which ends up being like a breaking point for quite a few things, particularly Phoenix Fire and like Lasting Judgment. So that's sort of more of a mediocre example, but it's one of those things where, again, you don't want to be using your removal on a 3-cost minion and then really paying the price for it later when you don't have those options. A really good one I think people should be looking at again is Scarlet Viper. Flying is actually quite strong. Now the threat of just removing minions repeatedly becomes quite good. And Songhai has a lot of useful tools in the early game to not get pinned against the wall themselves, to be able to play the Scarlet Viper in a technically useful position, such that basically it has to get removed, or this thing is going to terrorize you and your minions for the rest of the game. And it's still competing with very good cards like Dancing Blades, but depending on what sort of agenda you're trying to push, it could be really, really strong.
So let's just quickly talk here about pace, because that's another thing that's really changed from before. Before, it was huge tempo battle, right? spam out as many 2-drops as you can, and you're putting on pressure. And in a similar vein as scientists' theory about, say, using a deck saturated with 2 and 4 drop plays, right, to really curve out well and maintain that tempo. But now there's definitely been a change in pace, right? And this has something to do with the card draw. So there are two things that have really jumped out to me. One is the card draw aspect, right? Now, would you say that you should be cramming your deck full of card draw? Is it something that's now starting to annex a large part of your deck, or are you just looking for 1 or 2 very specific sources of card draw to refuel? What do you guys think? We'll start with you, Mogwai.
All right. I think this is. I've actually talked with Nick about this. I had no previous experience with this whole thing. Like, I had no idea, so I didn't really know if abusing card draw was going to be, good or not. I think that's kind of one of those things that until you test it, you realize. And I think it's what Nick here would classify as a trap. Having a lot of different ways to draw cards can actually clog you up, and it's not like your hand is going to get clogged up, because when you're only drawing one card, all you need to do is play one card. And as long as you haven't gained any extra value, you're gonna, draw that one card, and you're not gonna lose anything in the process. Like the old Duelyst, you always want to have 4 cards in your hand at the end of your turn, so you would draw 2. So now I think card draw is going to be very important. I think cards like, obviously a card like Spelljammer is ridiculous. Mogwai is going to be very good too. Yay. And you got, Silent Second Wish, you got Aegis Barrier, stuff like that replaces itself. I had to, I'm sorry.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
I don't regret it.
Best card in the game, counterplay nerf. All right.
Leave him alone.
Yeah.
Leave him alone. He's relevant again. God damn it, I'm so hyped. But I think that it's going to be necessary, but to a controlled extent. I think not having too many ways, like having a deck with like 3 Silent Sword Wish, 3 Silent Second Wish, 3 Wind Strikes, fucking Mogwai too, why not? Spelljammer, just those kind of things, like all together, and in less amounts. Like I exaggerate a bit over there, but I was a bit radical with my example. But yeah, it's definitely gonna be it's not really the way to go. I think card draw is gonna be good, but to a limited sense, because you want to have actual content on your deck. You're gonna have stuff that actually does more than draw you more stuff. It's as simple as that, really. So I think to an extent.
Scientist, while we're talking about this card draw issue, it has something to do, it goes hand in hand also with the hand size when you open the game. I've noticed, and perhaps I'm wrong here, but what I've seen is that there are 2 interesting shifts that have happened in the pacing of a match. Due to the card draw mechanic change, and due to having this larger opening hand, it now seems that the opening phases of the game, the early turns, sort of 1 through 3, are a little bit faster than they were before. And then when you sort of transition from the mid-game into the late game, the game seems to slow down a bit. Have you noticed this? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you've indirectly brought up a design feature that I'd like to highlight. They've recalibrated the strength of the card such that 2 drops are still very powerful for their mana cost. 3 drops have actually improved significantly, where they were previously just sort of the joke of the mana cost, in my opinion, where like the best thing you could people considered Chaos Elemental just because there was like nothing else. But now we've seen a radicalization, I would say, of the 4-drop slot. Emerald Rejuvenator has changed to the point that I don't see myself playing it. Twilight Sorcerer is now in the 5 slot because it was just, understandably too good at the 4 slot. Artifact Hunter, which was probably one of the next best up, and arguably so because it tutors a card. Exactly what you're going to draw. If you build your deck around it, it can be very powerful. But a 3/3 stat line, maybe. It's like worth considering. The card I'm actually looking at the most right now and hoping to abuse is Duelyst.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm throwing yeah, because it's one of those things where you it's gonna get a trade in. And then once you get that 0-10, you're not, people aren't really going to be playing Night Sorrow anymore. Like, I don't expect Hollow Grove Keeper to be a part of the meta, although it could be an answer. If you now throw in things like Shadow Reflection or Killing Edge, you now have some really serious threats on the board that you can get out starting at 5 mana, where you can actually combo with things. So that's what, like, I think it's actually, a consideration in the 4 slot now, and it's one of the first things I'm going to be experimenting with. But so I digress. The 4 slot has taken a big hit from where it was before, and the power curve is such that 2 is very good. 2 is very good. 3 is very good. 4 is like not so great, and then 5 jumps up pretty dramatically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's not so important to hit 4 at this point. You're not, are you really rushing to get a Duelyst out? No, you're not. But you are rushing to get that Dancing Blades out to get ahead. I think this actually leads to a significant advantage for player 2 if they are able to control the early game in a reasonable sense, such that the opponent can't accelerate walking onto a tile for 5. I need to specify that, because if you play a minion onto a tile and then or you walk one on and play a minion onto a tile, so that you actually have, as player 1, on your second turn, you are able to accelerate to 5, where you can go 2 and 3. That's still really strong, and that, I think, is going to be like the advantage that player 1 gets, since the 2 and 3 drops are quite strong at the moment, and central positioning has taken a little bit of a decrease in value when there are fewer minions being played. There's more relative room to work with, and there are fewer positional elements that you need to work off of each other, such that you only need one space in each direction from your general where you need to be playing minions. You don't need to be in a position where you want to play one thing one direction, another thing another direction, and walk a third, something like that. So central positioning is a little bit less relevant once the mana tiles are utilized. So that's going to be the advantage for player 1, is going 2-3 on turn 2, and then being the first one to 5 and to 6 and to 7 is going to be the advantage for player 2. So I think it is going to be important that players design their decks to be effective going first or second, because if you just run pure value cards going first, you're always going to be playing everything second. Like, if you don't have an opportunity to push the agenda in some way as player 1, you're gonna lose most of those games where it's like they play a Dancing Blades first, then you have to play a Dancing Blades, then they play an Archon, and you have to respond to that Archon. It's too difficult when you're trying to constantly answer things. And this relates back to the single target removal. When that is a lot less prevalent, and you're not gonna get so many opportunities to use it, there are a lot fewer opportunities for comebacks. So getting ahead is a very important thing. So when people think, oh, it's just value, tempo is quite significant, to the point where if they don't have the right big card on each right turn, you can run them out of the game pretty quickly. Because if we group healing in the category of answers, that's another card that healing you're just not going to see when you need to see it, right? You're going to have 1, maybe 2 draws at it, and that's it. Whereas in the old version of Duelyst, you can stall, you can trade, you can more reliably draw into healing. But now, you either have it in hand or you're pretty much not going to see it. So, yeah, there's gonna be a very fine balance between strategy as player 1 and player 2.
Another interesting thing before we move on to our next section here, and Naggart and I, we were having this discussion today when we were busy testing decks, is that the difficulty of your decisions when it comes to mulligans and replace choices seems to have really stepped up a notch, because of moving to a single card draw thing. And exactly what you were just saying, right? If I mull this away right now, the chances I'm going to get it back when I need it are low. So how much do I need it? So there's a whole nother system of evaluation that's kicked up a notch from the previous version. I mean, Nagit,
Yeah,
do you have something to say here?
That has something to do with what Mogwai said before, with preserving your resources. You want to sometimes you want to keep certain cards even in your opening hand, even though you want to play them later in the game, because you just know in this certain matchup or against this faction in general, you will need this card. So you keep it early on, because you, with the one card draw per turn, you don't know if you're going to get it back soon enough. And so this is also a very important fact, that you have your resources when you need them.
So
See-
matchup, I feel like a knowledge of a matchup with your particular deck has become even more important, because of the trickiness of your mulligan and replace decisions now, due to drawing one card a turn. It in some ways, I feel that it emphasizes the player's muscle memory of matchups and specific resources that they're going to need. It's like an extra information that you need to have on hand. It's not just automatic anymore. That may just be because, okay, it's a new phase right now, but I personally feel like these decisions have become slightly more tricky than before. It's definitely something to watch out for players experimenting in the new meta.
I think. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was gonna. I think
No,
all
go for
this. Yeah, I think all this comes down to the fact that it's very simple, really. The game has changed in a way that cards that become more of a threat if they are not answered are much stronger now, and can be very hard to deal with. I believe cards like Crimson Oculus are extremely powerful now and very dangerous. I've not really tried it much myself, but I honestly just thought about it, and it's just really scary, because if you don't, like, either you waste a valuable way of removal on a 3-drop, or that thing could be the end of you later on in the match. Like, that thing can get out of control really swiftly, and in a form, like, every single creature that develops over time, like Portal Guardian, for example, which I believe is also it's going to be good too. I feel like creatures like that, then also like minis, like for example the Suntide Maiden, because they can heal themselves constantly. They can replenish themselves over and over again, thus giving you value. I think all these cards are going to be much better now, much better, and the approach is, yeah, like I agree. Like if you lead off with 5 cards and I'm facing Vanar, for example, and I got a Jax, you can bet your ass I'm keeping that. The one thing that I fear with this change, the one thing that I'm not the most excited about, is that a lot of these matches, you're not gonna draw a certain card. Like there's a portion of your deck you're not even gonna see, because I think not only is the game going faster now, exactly, you're not drawing enough. Like, you're ending games with like 28 cards in your deck. Like, so that's definitely like the biggest change, definitely for me. And it's one that I still don't know exactly how I feel about, really. So I wanted to point it out, because you guys were talking about all these things, and they were just they're all connected.
Important.
Really.
I think it's important to point it out.
Carl and Ninja, I actually disagree with you about the skill in the replace mechanic at the moment.
Ooh, okay.
I
let's hear it.
think the stakes are raised, right? If you're wrong, there's no going back, right? You're never going to see that card again if you needed it. But when you have so let's say in the former version of Duelyst, you would typically sit with somewhere between 4 and 6 cards in your hand most of the time, right? That's how I played the game, at least. And you would typically have a number of cards at the same mana cost, because that's how decks were designed, right? Like I would have a number of 4-drops. I would potentially have, a couple of 5+ drops, and I would have, some form of removal, somewhere along those lines. Or I would have multiple forms of removal, and then you have to decide which of these do I want to replace. And now you're sort of making a 1 out of 5 decision, right? And because of there's overlapping mana cost in the deck design, there is, it might be, the stakes might not be as high, but there is going to be a small edge that occurs every time you decide, do I keep this Hailstone Golem or Razorback? Like, which is going to get me more value? Am I going to have enough minions predictably in 1 to 2 turns that Razorback is what I need? Do I see myself needing to trade up versus do I need these stats now to get ahead on the board? And it's not as consequential, but it is a more difficult decision, I would say. Whereas now, I typically find myself, and from your experience, you guys can jump in with this as well, but I'm certainly not sitting with 4 to 6 cards in hand. I'm sitting with 3 on average, possibly less, starting from a fair number of turns on.
Every single game, yeah.
Yeah. And maybe that's a failure on our part to design decks at this point. We'll have to see, but based on the experience we've seen or based on my experience and what you guys are corroborating so far, when you're sitting on, say, 3 cards and you're on 5 or 6 mana, that you're just going to mull away the 2-drop. There's no decision making to be made there. I have to, dig for, I need to play a 5, I need to look for my big cards every single turn. There's just like no other option, right? Because, a 6-drop is just infinitely more powerful now than a 2-drop plus a 4-drop, somewhere in that sense. So so not only are you putting less power, fewer threats on the board, you're also hurting yourself in card advantage. So once you sort of cross that I have 4 cards or fewer in my hand moment, you're solely replacing the lowest costed card in your hand like almost every time. Is that not what you guys have been experiencing?
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Yeah. So in that sense, there's less decision making on that point, right? It's just I need to get rid of that card. Yeah.
That's why I reached that's why I reached the conclusion that we need to drop the 2-drop. Sorry, I wanted to point. Like, we need to definitely include less 2-drops now than before. Yeah. A lot less. That's the first conclusion I've reached after playing today. Like, it's just I think I'm okay with 6.
Okay.
Personally.
Yeah, I'm thinking somewhere along the same lines too, Mogwai.
Let's move on and get into our next section here, and we're gonna get your opinions on a couple of cards. First, faction cards, and then neutral cards that stood out to you in this patch release, and also a couple of negative cards, both for factions and neutrals. We're gonna start with Scientist here.
Yeah. So a couple faction cards really went up in value. Artifacts, in general, are going to go up since there are going to be fewer minions on board to deal instances of damage. They can reliably survive for longer turns. And there's one that really stands out as being the most powerful from that, as far as artifacts go, being higher costed at 4. But the real strength from Regalia comes from when you are able to stack them. And the risk of playing it before is that you play it on 4, and you didn't develop any other minions, and there are a couple 2-drops on the board with a general, which end up removing it that first turn, and then it's like kind of a wash, and you took some damage and didn't do anything. But now, the chances that the opponent is going to have multiple minions on board early on is severely decreased. And from my experience, you can equip a Regalia on curve, and if you have a second one in hand, you are almost guaranteed to be able to stack it the following turn. And coming back from that is, everyone knows how oppressive stacked Regalia is. It just feels like there's nothing you can do the whole game.
It's hell. Yeah.
So this is particularly strong, and it lends a little bit of value to Artifact Hunter, specifically in Lion-R. So I'm looking forward to seeing that played. Aegis Barrier, I think, is also a really strong card. One, because it has a very useful effect for 1 mana, I believe. So when you think about cycle cards, you think Lionheart's Blessing now, you think First Wish, something that has, a 1 mana effect and will draw you a card. And as far as this goes, I think Aegis Barrier is on the much stronger side, since Lion-R minions, you think like Elix Stormblade, if you're playing a greedier list, Grandmaster Zir, your Ironcliff Guardian, which is going to be a 3 of in every deck again. Those are really tough minions to chew through, unless, and oftentimes warrant single target removal. Yeah. So if you can get an Aegis Barrier put on one of these, they're going to have to chew through it. They're going to have to spend a lot of resources, dumping minions to try and deal with this. And that makes Holy Immolation a lot more dangerous again, which is, it was a pretty strong card before, I would say, not as oppressive as a lot of people claimed, but now I think it's going to be really powerful. Since minions are a lot more likely to be able to stick on the board, and that's really what lends Holy Immolation its value, when you can get the healing effect and deal the damage. My last one is Onyx Bear Seal. which had already begun to see a little bit more play, but had never, because of the spell high variants, but just wasn't quite consistent with the agenda of previous Songhai builds. But now, as single target removal has sort of been nerfed across the board, you can say, like Hailstone indirectly nerfed, Martyrdom has taken a mana hit, and healing being particularly more valuable, Martyrdom has a sort of secondary drawback in that it will give your opponent life, which is a lot more significant than it was before. Because in like Lionar Mirrors, the games wouldn't really start until 6 or 7 mana because you would just Martyrdom, bring it back, Martyrdom, bring it back, and so forth. Now you have to be a lot more careful with how you use that card, and when it comes out, typically is going to be at the later time points, and the opponent is very often going to get a full heal off of that now. So Martyrdom, I think, has actually fallen quite a few ranks in value. But one of the ones that hasn't is Onyx Bear Seal, which is on the cheaper side. It's cheaper than Eggmorph. It's half the cost of Metamorphosis, and it gives you that single target removal. And yes, there is the drawback of giving your opponent a 0/2 Pando, which can't be attacked. But if you are looking for a card that, especially in Songhai, which has burst potential, where you can make sort of swing turns, where you can use that Onyx Bear Seal to remove a 6 or 7 cost minion, and then play something like a Lantern Fox, which is gonna be a lot more threatening when you have the board because you are able to get multiple Phoenix Fires off of it instead of just having it, trade once into a Hailstone Golem or something like that. That card really fits what I believe will be the agenda of Songhai now. So Onyx Bear Seal is particularly strong. The negative side, Spirit Harvester, the 5/5 for 5 is decent, but you're just not getting the same value as you would from like a Dancing Blades. There are just too many cards I think are gonna be competing for that slot. Sunset Paragon, the one of the new cards that's going to be coming out, I'm particularly interested in. I can't wait to see that card being utilized. I think that could be a real game changer in a sense. So I think the 5 slot is going to get more competitive. I think Tempest has taken a significant nerf as well, since fewer minions on board, fewer things to hit. Jax is going to be a little bit, maybe you play it, maybe you don't. It's kind of tough to do something at 6 mana, which is not going to affect the board, but there are still factions that can utilize it, so we'll see. But in general, you just can't play lots of little 2-drops all the time and have Tempest clean everything up. It's just going to be a lot more, big, bulky, statted minions, so Tempest, not so great. The neutral pluses, Prismatic Illusionist, I think, is a really rated card at this moment. Yeah, I believe it's... it's been changed to a 2/3 for 3 mana, and it has whenever you cast a spell, put on a 2/1 Illusionist. When we talked about threats that don't go, you don't want to use removal on early, this is one of those cards where you have to really think hard if you're going to use this or not. Because if this thing, you can rely, if you have to spend time walking all the way over to the board and getting something to fight this, you could be looking at, at least 3 spells being cast. And at that point, you've generated, so you have the 2/3, and then you have 3 times, if you get 3 spells off, you get another 6/3 of stats. So that ends up being, 8/6 worth of stats for 3 mana, somewhere in that range, in a reasonable distribution. This is going to be a really dangerous card. It's going to be, and it's one of those things that forces decks to have early answers. Otherwise, you can get punished pretty quickly. Songweaver is now your neutral Mist Dragon Seal, which is, again, a very, very good card. Since, for 1 mana, getting, it's, you're not drawing the card, but getting that buff and getting the trades you want tends to be really, really important. And you can already see a lot of cards that have synergy with it, especially when opponents can get defensive at times. You fly in that Grandmaster Zir and Divine Bonded, and it's like, well, can't play around that. And then just your more standard, Lantern Fox turn 1 going second, and then you fly it in immediately onto the mana tile, kill off whatever 2/3 was there. You draw a Phoenix Fire. It now has 3 health left, so it's going to draw 2 more for you. Plus, you get the body. It's a very reasonable. It's a very, very good card, and it's going to see play in a lot of decks. The bad ones across the neutral that I've seen, Sandburrow. I don't know why this card exists.
It has something must happen. I don't know. It has a meaning. I believe so. Sorry.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I
believe
have yet to discover the synergy here, but you know,
Sorry.
when a card gets invented that says, when you return 2 cards to your hand over the course of a game, you win or something like that, then maybe Sandburrow gets played. But we're like, yeah, maybe it gets played then, maybe. But we're still a long way away from that happening. So typically, anytime you can use a general hit to just de-develop your board, not so great. Emerald Rejuvenator now is also just like, I just can't justify playing it anymore. That 3/3 stat line is just like, it's just begging the opponent to play a Dancing Blades next turn, right? It's like, did I really want that 3 health just to be down 4-6 stats on the board? Like, no, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I just have to say something here. Nagert and I were testing decks today, and there was a point there where I gave him the gap to play Dancing Blades, and he was going second. And I mean, after getting absolutely thrashed by a couple of Dancing Blades being deployed and one-shotting my Rejuvenators, it really, hit home that, wow, that 3/3 stat line, the fact that Emerald Rejuvenator actually dies now to Dancing Blades is a pretty big deal.
It's a very big deal. Pretty much anything that dies to Dancing Blades, you need to think really hard if that's going to be the consideration. That 3 to 4 health, that is the major breaking point you need to consider on all cards now, in my opinion.
Always put Mogwai behind your back. He'll be safe.
Mogwai always has my back, so yeah, that's where it is.
Well, there we go. Right, so how about you, Mogwai? Let's hear what you see as standout cards, weak cards, factions, and neutrals.
Scientist took all the good ones. All the cool ones. So I'm left. Okay, so I there's one that I actually thought of just now, and I'm actually going to start off with it because I heard him talking about Regalia, and it came to mind and that is Hexblade. I think Hexblade is extremely good now. Extremely good now. I think 3 copies of it are going to be very justifiable for a deck because it's one of those cards that performed better than I expected. I was really surprised at how it just saved my ass so many times because of the fact that my opponent would drop an Arcus Spellbinder, for example. And I know my boy Carl here agrees with me. He loves Hexblade himself, and he's the one who let me know. He's the one who talked to me about this card. And I started using it back, last month. Before this patch happened, and I found really good success with it. And now it's just so much better. It's so good because it's for example, we saw scientists talk about Lionar with Aegis Barrier, with the Ironclad Guardians. They can be very oppressive with those big units, and Hexblade enables you to take down those units without having to target them with any spells. Hexblade also has a very good synergy with Mirage Master, which I think is extremely good now. A lot better than before because you can just Mirage Master something and then Hexblade it. I feel like Hexblade is definitely going to become a staple quite soon, and people will realize just how powerful that artifact is. Just honestly, it's safe to assume that artifacts in general are overall more powerful, and I'll talk about a certain card, why it was buffed. I believe it was because of that. But we got another, in my opinion, broken ass card right now, which is Lantern Fox. Scientists did mention it. I think this card is ridiculous. I think this card in this kind of game, with the draw mechanic as such, is just bonkers. Lantern Fox, the one downside that it had previously is that since you do draw 2 cards, a lot of times, especially combined with the likes of Tuskspore, you would clog up your hand and you would not really be able. Sometimes you had 5 cards in your hands, but you have 2 minions to attack said Lantern Fox, so he would not get the second Phoenix Fire. That scenario happened so many times. Now, Lantern Fox is really scary because, especially if you get it out early in the game, it's gonna generate you 2 Phoenix Fires most of the time. Sometimes even 3. If obviously that's a very specific scenario. In which it attacks a 1-attack minion and such. But it's the fact that minion can generate you an extra Phoenix Fire on top of the fact that it's dealing damage to you because it's dealing 2 damage every time it attacks. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that that minion alone is the reason why Sanhai is so powerful. Like obviously Tuskboar is better too now, but I think Lantern Fox. I think Lantern Fox needs the Mogwai treatment personally. But yeah, because that's racist. Mogwai you take away come on, you hate Spaniards. Come on now. But yeah, and the other card that I wanted to talk about when it comes to Infaction, which I actually mentioned this to Nick. I'm really intrigued about this card. I think it's going to be very good, and it's going to become a staple later on. Obviously, it depends on the deck that you build around it, but I think it's really good, and it's Cryogenesis from Vanar. I think it's definitely improved a lot with this change, and I think it's better than Hailstone Prison now. I think Cryogenesis is really good in the early game because it kills a minion off, helps you retain board presence, and on top of that, it draws you a card, a Vespear. So it's not only can you design your deck to draw specific Vespirs, because I feel like Snow Cheese, for example, is better now, and stuff like that. It not only that, but it just enables you to deal 4 damage, and 4 damage is quite a lot. Like there's a lot of stuff you can remove with it, and I feel like Cryogenesis is going to be a lot better nowadays, with only drawing 1 card, because the downside to Cryogenesis before is that a lot of times you didn't really need to draw that extra card. You'd rather carry a Hailstone Prison and have, kill a minion when they have 6 cards in their hands, and, because it can't come back to their hand. So
Right.
I think that this rule change is so impactful because it's made Hailstone Prison quite less relevant, and I feel like Cryogenesis is really good now, personally. And when it comes to I'm going to go over the bad faction cards. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. Very easy ones to, address, I think, which are Fenrir War Master. I get emotional with this.
I'm sad too. Yeah.
Why, Nick? Why?
Yeah.
Like, I just... damn.
We let this happen, Mogwai.
Like it's insane. Like it's a lot in a lot of scenarios. This thing is not going to be any better than a 3/3. As sad as it seems, it's not going to be better than not too much better than a 3/3 because, or let's say 3/4 better.
It's really just a 3/4.
It's really just a 3/4, and that is so sad. Like the fact, I was facing this dude on the ladder. I chromatic called his Fenrir, and it just died. I didn't have to do anything else. And one would say that I was very happy about that, but it didn't feel right. I felt dirty, man. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And I don't know. I don't know what use Fenrir has now. I think they completely killed the card, and that's devastating. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that's devastating because it's one of my favorite cards. Like, not only competitive wise, but design wise, I just love Fenrir War Master, and they were mean to it, man. I know they had to nerf it because in a format like this, if you have a 3-drop that replaces itself, that's very strong. That's too strong.
The value is too great.
But
it's too great for that.
Maybe they could have approached it differently. I don't know. Maybe they could have they could have made the mini that it spawns weaker than the original, something like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't like them making it a 3/2. It's so I cry every time, basically. And the next
would you rather it be a 2/3? A
Yes.
2/3 with the same effect? Yeah.
Yes, because it would be.
Then it's kind of like a 2/6. Yeah.
Yes. It would punch holes at things. It would be present. I like the reason Fenrir is so good. It's not because of the amount of damage that it outputs. It's because of the fact that it's so sticky. So I would be okay with it being a 2/3. I don't like 3/2. I feel like that the ability is kind of silly with that stat line. It's kind of like unnecessary. It's kind of it's flashy. Some people will think it's good, but then just put a little bit of logic into it, and it's no. Please bring hashtag bring Fenrir back.
Yeah.
On the comment section down below, please.
Yeah.
And next we got Night Sorrow Assassin, which is I was talking about this with Nick earlier too. We both agreed that this. We both think this was unnecessary. Really, I think Night Sorrow was definitely a very strong unit. But it's not like it left a full-on body behind. It left 1 health. Like, it's a 3/1. It was a mini that was very easy to pick off. So it was very efficient, very strong removal. But I think the nerf was too severe. Like, not only did they replace, they also reduced his attack. Like, I honestly, I don't think it's worth playing now. And that's pretty crazy to say, considering how strong it was, I don't know. I just that's also a sad change in my opinion. I think they overdid it with that, and but of course, I mean they have the reasons behind these changes. So, and when it comes to sorry if I'm thinking, but if we got the neutral cards, I'm gonna talk about the three. We're gonna start off with Mogwai because I'm that egotistical, and I want to talk about my card. I think even though it did get nerfed, so you would assume that I wouldn't talk about this card, in this slot. I have to say that it's better. I think it's definitely better. I think it's definitely viable. I don't care what Nick says. I know Mogwai's viable, and Mogwai will be good, and he will perform really well, and he will eventually become a staple. I believe it, and I do sleep every night believing that. I think it's very plausible, and yeah, I'm very happy about Mogwai because in a metagame like this, in which with a rule like this, in which you're always searching for more resources to use. Mogwai is, it has a decent stat line. Obviously, it's 2/3 is little for 3, but when the fact that you have the fact that card can actually replace itself, and if you actually keep it away from your opponent's distance, it can actually start generating you a lot of value, and it can lead to you being able to make certain plays because you have a lot more resources and a lot more combos. I feel like Mogwai would be prevalent in a lot of aggro decks, especially when fucking Spelljammer is dealt with. And I think it's going to be good. And Crimson Oculus, like I said before, I think it's, I want to talk about it real quick. It's just, what I mentioned before. I think it's going to be really good. Really, minions that go unanswered and that become stronger as time passes, I believe are going to be a lot scarier now. And, I stated why previously, so no need to go into that again. But basically, I think Crimson is going to be a force to be reckoned with because if you don't deal with it properly, it's just going to buff itself over and over again. And before you even realize it, it's at 7 attack and it's dealing massive damage. So I think that card is also going to see a lot of play and it's going to be very good. And Rushcrawler, it's a 2/3 now, so it's actually a reliable 2-drop, which is music for my ears. I've been wanting this change for forever. And I think some people may be confused as to why they did this. And the reason I think they did this, and I mean, it's not, I think it's a fact, is because artifacts are overall stronger now. Like the power level of artifacts has definitely increased with this rule change. And we see it in the likes of Arc and Regalia and Hexblade. It's just Spectral Blade is also great. Like just so many, solid. I would guess Snowpiercer is fantastic again. So, like I think buffing Rushcrawler was definitely a necessity for this. And when it comes to bad cards, neutral cards, I've only played one day, so I can't really go much into detail. But there's one card that I was really growing feelings for. Because I was using it in ladder and such on Vanar recently. I got it from Alana. Alana really talked to me about Dragonlark, about how good it was at utility, how good it was as a minion that you could drop at any time really and keep away from exchanging, and then combine it later on in the game with cards like Aspen of the Mountains, or have it be your final blow with Razorback. A lot of different utilities that it could have, but. The thing about Dragonlark now is that, it could be good for reaching orbs, it can be good for exchanging, but it's a 2-1 for 1 in a format in which you're drawing 1 card per turn. And I think that's just not justifiable, like using it. I just don't think, because you don't want to top deck that shit when you need a comeback card, first of all. And second of all, it's just, with so many little resources, it just doesn't do enough, and it's definitely, I feel like it can definitely lead you to losing value. So I think Dragonlark is worse now, definitely. And I think it's a bit unviable as of now. So yeah. Especially with Songweaver around and stuff. Really cool card.
So having covered some of the cards that stand out to us and ones that feel sort of underwhelming, let's get brief opinions here on the big winners and big losers as far as factions go. With the recent changes. So, Mogwai, who would you say are the big winners and big losers in terms of factions in the upcoming metagame?
I'm going to respond this with my own, like I've heard a lot of stuff I've heard a lot of people talk, Discord, maybe chatting with Nick or whatever, you guys too. Like, I've spoken with a lot of people, but I'm gonna respond this with, my own experience, 100% my own experience and my own view, 100%, and how I see it. I may not be right, but I think I am. It's when it comes to factions that are winners, I think we can all agree Lionar is incredibly strong now and potentially the best faction, or at least the most threatening one because of cards like Aegis Barrier. I can't emphasize enough how oppressive Ironclave Guardian is. Ironclave Guardian is going to end so many games and is going to be hated by many and is going to be the main, it's going to be like the catalyst to the rise of Hollow Grove Keeper, I think. And it's very good. Very good. And Arc of Regalia, Holy Immolation is even better now. Like, they have so much power. Divine Bond is so scary. And I feel like they're really going to benefit from cards like Twilight Sorcerer now, which I think it's going to be also really strong. So I think that faction. And another faction that I think is going to be insanely strong, and the faction that I've been the most consistent with today, as I was laddering, is Magmar. I think Magmar is insane. I think Magmar is super powerful because some people were like really freaking out when they saw them nerf Metamorphosis, and I'm kind of like, thank fucking God they nerfed that thing. Like, it's insane. And that's why I kind of disagree. I disagree. Fuck it. I disagree with Nick when it comes to the Spirit Harvester. I think because of cards like Metamorphosis and such, I think it's still a very strong card. And I feel like Jax is actually a very powerful minion now. Very threatening because people are running less AoE, and it's a minion that by itself, like I had this player use it against me when I was in the ladder today, and I remember that I was playing Magmar and I did not have Spirit Harvester in hand, and I had to waste a bunch of resources for that. I had to waste a Mecantor for 2 Jaxies, then a Kinetic Equilibrium for the one in the top corner, because I was in the center. I couldn't reach anything. So I had to waste a bunch of stuff just to deal with Jax. So I think cards like Spirit Harvester is going to combat that. And on top of that, I think even though it only deals 1 damage, it's still enough to eliminate a lot of 2-drops with your own general, for example. And the synergy with the Metamorphosis is just monstrous. 3 cards. Flash Reincarnation, Metamorphosis, and Spirit Harvester. You wipe the board clean. That is way too much power, and I refuse to not, use it. You know what I mean? So Magmar is very strong now because of stuff like that. Natural Selection, I feel like it's really good if you're running and I feel like a card that neither Nick or us have talked about, and it just came to mind, and I should have spoken about it, and that I think is going to be quite powerful. I think it's going to be insanely powerful is Keeper of the Veil, which I've already abused a lot with this Control Magmar variant, especially like spamming Mecantor War Beast. Like I was spamming Mecantor War Beast, and then Dark Nemesis is also very scary with Keeper of the Veil, and without it, Arc and Spellbind. Like, it's such a strong card with the proper synergy, and I do feel like it's not going to be fit in every deck because if you're running a lot of 2-drops, it's not, But even in those decks, I feel like it's gonna you could justify it. But the thing is, we're at a point now where there's a lot of 5-drops. There's a lot of good 5-drops. It's what Nick says. We've went from a point from going from a bunch of 4-drops and a few good 5-drops to a shitload of amazing 5-drops. Dancing Blades, Keeper of the Veil, Twilight Sorcerer, which Nick told me earlier that he thought that it's going to become a staple, which I completely agree with after trying it a few games. I only needed to try it out a few games to realize how stupidly good it is. So yeah, I think I definitely think Magmar is gonna be because of that, but it's not gonna be as easy to build because of all these all these minions competing, basically.
How about big losers?
Big losers. Now, this is harder for me to answer because, for example, Vitruvian, I think it's fantastic right now. I think it's not in a bad spot at all. I think Songhai can also defend itself. People have been saying. And I'm not going to point at anybody.
I sense it coming.
The guy,
coming.
The guy with a head.
Yeah.
I was going to say the guy with a headset, but you 3 have headsets. We all have headsets. Nick says that vanar is probably going to be. Well, he told me. He told me yesterday, so maybe he changed his opinion. But I don't know because I think it has a lot of good cards, but Defender nerf definitely hurt it. But maybe vanar is the one that has suffered the most as of now. but I can't safely say. I feel like all factions can compete right now, but I haven't gathered much experience on it. Yeah, I've been playing a lot, but it's only a day, so.
I mean,
I'm
it is only early days, but I think it's interesting to take stock of our perspectives about these things at this point, and then as we move forward to revisit these and see what has changed.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the process of learning, which needs to be explored.
So I'm very because the thing Nick says before, like, and what you said too, it's learning a new game, and that is so fun. That is, I love the chaos now on the ladder. I love learning what works and what doesn't. I love it. It's so fun. If you're looking for the best moment to get into, it's now. Just get into it now. You're not gonna regret it. Like, it's really fun. Like, I've been playing all day. I forgot to eat. I almost like I need some calories in my system. Like, Jesus, I just couldn't. I couldn't stop. It was like there's too many things I want to try. Like, I don't have time. It sucks. First world problems,
First world problems, man. So, scientist, how about you? Big winners, big losers with this patch.
Yeah. So the way I saw the faction rankings before was that Vanar for me was clearly the number one, and then Lionar and Magmar were sitting there at number two, competing with each other, sort of as like, who can counter Vanar the best. And they both had good options, and then they sort of have to fight each other, and it ends up being 50-50 for them. So when we take that as a starting point, I do think Vanar is the biggest loser by a pretty good margin. Because they do still have some strong cards. Like Cryogenesis does hit that, it draws you a card. It has that 4 health breaking point, so that's going to be able to remove quite a few things for you. Chromatic Cold still decent, not nearly as good as before, I believe, because you don't quite get the same tempo gain, and there's going to be a lot more just like pure stats than there are dispellable effects in a sense. Sometimes, an appropriately timed Chromatic Cold could just win you the game. I've seen a lot of interesting builds on the Vanar side, trying to run the Vesper variations, using the Glacial Elemental, because, when we throw in the group of, cheap cards that, if go unanswered, are just going to dominate the game, that is one of them. You use that with Bone Shield Barrier, and then you use that with Ancient Grove, and, suddenly you have, a million things on the board, and then you suddenly Razorback lethal. That's nice. It's, it's a good example of, like, when everything works, it's like, oh, this was beautiful, everything went according to plan. But Vanar doesn't have those catch-up mechanisms, and healing is just, like, at such a premium, to the point where, like, can you really afford to run Emerald Rejuvenator as Vanar right now? I don't think you can. So when you run up against a Songhai, like, what are you gonna do? It's gonna be, you're just gonna get burned out really quickly. Those Bone Chill Barriers aren't gonna save you from that Lantern Fox that keeps punching you in the face, right? And then you get spiraled on 8 still, and like, who cares if you put down an Ancient Grove? It didn't matter. So Vanar is the big loser in my mind. Songhai and Vitruvian, I think, are relatively big winners. Vitruvian in particular. So some people still thought Songhai was oppressive in a sense. Spellhai was not a consistent deck. Like, you could not play that to the high ranks. Songhai now is going to have a number of different viable builds. Like, just did some own exploring, some exploring on my own, just looking through the collections, and you can run like control variants with Archon Spellbinders and Dancing Blades, because you still have great control mechanisms like Twin Strike. Twin Strike is phenomenal now. Onyx Bear Seal.
Oh shit.
Yeah, Twin Strike is super good.
I didn't even think about that.
Onyx Bear Seal, really, really strong. You still have those like constant value regenerators, Tusk Boar, Lantern Fox. There's just a lot of ways to go with that deck. From sort of the control side, and then you can still burn people. Saberspine Tiger is really strong again, 4/1 for that's an answer, or it's 4 damage, and like with the new Primus Fist, there's a lot of quick damage output, and again, because healing is few and far between, being able to burn people is really, really strong. I've even built like a Golem Songhai deck that did fairly well, because one of the things outside of Tuskboar, they don't really have those great other in-faction minions. You think a lot more about their spells outside of like Lantern Fox and Tuskboar. So if you throw in a bunch of really strong stats, just for its mana cost, where it's like, yeah, now I can, play a Golem Metallurgist turn 1, walk it onto a tile and drop the Bright Moss Golem. It's like, you're Songhai. What are people going to do against you? It's really, really tough. Like if there's one faction that abuses getting ahead more than any other, it's Songhai. So, a lot of, we went from having basically one decent build for Songhai to having, I imagine they're going to be like on the range of 3 to 4 very serious builds for them. And then the other big winner is Vitruvian, who was really bottom of the barrel in my opinion, because they didn't have the early game tools to make it to playing some of their stronger minions, not even like super powered, but just stronger. Like Amara, if it goes unanswered, is really great, but when it's a Vanar meta and Magmar is prevalent as well, then an Eggmorph or a Metamorphosis or that Hailstone or Chromatic Cold, and it's just like, well, that was too big of a tempo loss. I lost the game. But now, artifacts are going to get you through a lot of the early game. All artifacts went up in value, and no one has more artifacts than Vitruvian. Hexblade is a superstar now. Imperial Mechanist you're going to see as a 3 of in a lot of these decks. Because if you don't get those instances of damage, and you can actually reliably regenerate them, artifacts are going to be really, really strong. Just having a single one equipped, like going into your turn, can oftentimes be game-ending. When you think about combos with Aurora's Tears and Time Maelstrom, there needs to be some optimization for the right number of each of those cards, and they're still lacking like good in-faction minions for the most part, but in the 5 slot, they actually have Starfire Scarab, which is good enough to actually compete with things like Dancing Blades.
It's very solid. It's a very solid card. It's a little slow to develop because it doesn't have instant effect on the board. But man, it's chunky. Even if it gets silenced, it's still a 4/7. But if it doesn't get dealt with, it becomes a real nuisance.
Puts so much pressure. So much pressure.
Yeah.
It's
for sure.
strong.
That 7 health is like pretty. That's
it's one of my favorite minions.
Level of health. Yeah. So that's where I see it.
Okay. Nagert, your opinion's any different on this matter? Who's your biggest winner and biggest loser?
I can mostly agree with those two, and I think the biggest one of the biggest winners is Lana, as it just became extremely prevalent now, and it's really a strong faction, and it has basically all tools to compete at a high level. Although it was pretty strong before already, and with Time Maelstrom, Vitruvian was given a powerful tool as well to create some burst damage again, which they didn't have after they lost the old third wishes. And yeah, basically for the biggest loser, I'd see Vanar as well, because a lot of their tools lost a lot of their power, and they're generally a bit weaker now. They still have the tools, but they can't use them as effectively as they used to.
Okay.
I want to emphasize. I want to emphasize like a point.
Sure.
Regarding this, like you guys were talking about. Wait, I have a mental block. When you're gonna say something and you're keeping it in your mind, but then it pops out. All right, come on, Miguel. Come on, you can do this. You can do this. It was about Nick here was talking about we were talking about the Starfire Scarab, and then it was something very important I wanted to point out. I hate when this happens to me. Oh, God.
Okay, think about that for a second. I'd like to make
I'll
a
think
point about what liner decks I think are going to look like. I wouldn't be surprised if Martyrdom actually gets replaced by Repulsor Beast, because that healing is so relevant, and you're really only wanting to use it on those like 6-7 drop minions. And at that point, you've already gotten your beefy minions out. You really want to use that as sort of like your tempo play now. And if you're thinking that the game is actually going to end in 3 turns or so or less from when you play this card, you'd rather just not give them the healing, and then you get a 2/2 body on top of it. Repulsor Beasts are actually I don't know how you guys, I don't think, ever mained Lion-R, but when you get into the mind games of what happens in tournaments, the Linar mirrors would feature a lot of really interesting cards like Repulsor Beast back when Keeper of the Veil was a thing, right? Because you want to be able to deal with a minion and not put it in the graveyard such that Keeper of the Veil comes back, or sort of brings it back, right? You'd rather Repulsor Beast, and it also plays around things like Aegis Barrier, which were an important part of that matchup as well. So it's almost better in a sense to use that sort of like soft removal. Particularly Linar. Linar really, really wants to use it in that way. So I'm interested to see. But then you start thinking like, oh, the counters are going to be, people are going to run a lot of Song Weavers and so forth. There's going to be an evolution to around how Linar deals with minions. I think is going to be sort of like a defining feature of the metagame.
By the way, I remembered.
Oh yeah.
I felt like it was important because I was hearing Nanger talking about Vitruvian, and I felt like it was really important to talk about, emphasize a bit on Time Maelstrom because my brother, for example, he found out about the patch notes this morning when he was at work, and he got back and he told me like one of the first things he told me, he was very sad about Time Maelstrom. He thought it sucked now, and like I didn't really know how to classify that card at first. Honestly, I was a bit thrown off, but I remember Nick made a very good analogy of it. Like, the fact that combined with Hexblade at 7 mana, you can get 10 damage out of your hand right off the bat. Like, out of your hand, like burst with Time Maelstrom is pretty it's pretty scary. Like the fact that if you can actually like you don't even have to have the artifact equipped, but imagine that you're like at the other side of the board. You have a Hexblade equipped or a Staff of EQ. Right? Let's say Hexblade. Hexblade is more swag. So you got Hexblade. Yeah. And you have in your hand a Time Maelstrom and a Walfar Ankh. You equip the Walfar Ankh and then you hit him for 10 damage right off the bat for like all the distance in the world. Like it's really scary when you think about the things you can do with that card. And the question comes, is it too situational or not, you know? But I feel like it's really powerful. And I feel like even if you don't have an artifact equipped, the fact that your general, like you can reactivate it, there's a lot of different plays that you can make. I don't know. I feel like it's growing on me, definitely. Like at first I thought it was bad, actually. I thought it was, I didn't think it was bad, but I thought it was, decent. But now I think it may be a big thing for Vitruvian, and that didn't reach me at first. So that's why I think it's important to mention it, because a lot of people probably think the same way. They probably didn't really see it as anything too hot at first. Like, for example, my brother, he thought it sucked. But then after thinking about it, you realize the potential in it. So, yeah.
The value of out-of-hand damage, which is sword.
Yeah. I was just about to say that has really gone up in value in a big way. And I mean, when we were doing our first faction-specific podcast, we were talking to Wagnazak and Peepus and Riverath about the lethal ranges for Vitruvian, and Riv was saying that 2 is kind of the lethal range for Vitruvian, just to give you an idea of their
That's right.
their burst output wasn't very high after Third Wish was taken away. And as you guys are well aware, I'm a huge Vitruvian fan. I play a lot of Vitruvian, and when I saw the Time Maelstrom nerf, my first feeling was obviously, that was our big win conditions. I prefer playing sort of control-style decks or even combo-style decks. So I was a big fan of Artifact Vet, even though it was inconsistent and weak-ish before. It works great when all the stars align, but when they don't, it's terrible. You get boxed in and you just get crushed out of the game. It feels horrible. But I was testing today, and let me tell you, there are moments, like just consider this. People have this idea in their mind from back in the day with Artifact Vet, where it was, okay, so I need triple staff, and then I need one of them to survive, at least 2 of them to survive. Then I'm gonna go tears, Alcuin tears, and get off this wombo, right? It's like things that are manufactured in Wonderland. These combos, and when they happen, you are so excited. But let me tell you, they don't happen often. Now, consider this: you equip a Staff of Akir, it survives until next turn. Now, you equip 1 more staff and 1 tier, and then play Maelstrom. Okay, so that's what? That's
16.
6 mana? That is
Oh, no,
20
hold on.
damage.
20
It's
damage.
20 damage.
Oh my goodness.
20
Jesus.
damage. It is massive. Okay,
That's really
it is
scary.
not. It is not to be underestimated, and the chances that happens is not bad at all.
That's
Have a
6 mana,
staff.
right?
You can even
Staff.
yeah.
Here's-
As long as you had a staff that survived, one staff that survived, so you can even set it up so that you only equip one, right? You have a few in your hand. You play artifact hunters as well and stuff like that. You have one, and it survives even on one charge. And then next turn for 6 mana, you do 20 damage in that situation. It's scary. It is
Not
it is
bad.
scary. Beware. There is going to be, if it's not going to be me, it's going to be someone else. There's going to be a scary artifact vet list that's going to come out of this. And then we're going to see artifact hate coming out as well.
Time to play Rust Crawlers.
Yeah, time to play
Three.
multiple Rust crawlers.
I'll
But
carry 3
I'm not-
Rust Scholars and 3 Blue Tier Alchemists. You know, just
I'm not saying it's gonna plague the meta game, but I think that we should be well aware that Vitruvian now has very scary burst damage that can actually come relatively early. So it's something to look out for. Which brings us, incidentally, to our final section. And I'd like to hear from everybody here one deck archetype to look out for in the April meta game. And we're going to start with my co-host, Nangert, here.
Yeah, I know that that Mogwai played this deck today a lot, and I actually enjoy it as well. Which is Control Magmar.
you took it from me.
Yeah, I knew I was taking it from you, but I had to do it. And it's a great deck, and now with high drops having more potential of sticking to the board, it's a great deck, and it has a lot of potential in being one of the top decks in this in the April metagame.
How about you, Mogwai?
Well, I was gonna say that, and just to add more on to what Nanger says, I think Control Magmar is definitely gonna be very, it's gonna be high tier. Definitely, it's gonna be very prevalent because of the power of Metamorphosis. I think most people realize, but some people are not aware of how powerful this card is now, and the fact that they have such insane removal. I feel like Magmar, the combination of Metamorphosis and Eggmorph, I feel Eggmorph is a lot better now, is a lot stronger. Eggmorph just saves lives at this point. It's crazy. Like, it's really strong. And I feel like Magmar is really gonna shine, especially the control variants. And it can be control, like weird funky control with Keeper of the Veil, no minions and natural selection, or it can be, ping control, with your Yaxes and stuff to be able to hit the Metamorphosis targets, the Magmas. But I think it's going to be really strong. And when it comes to, if I don't have to say Control Magmar, even though I already spoke a lot, sorry, I do that. I ramble. I would say a deck that we would all definitely have to look out for is Lionar. I think Lionar with a lot of Divine Bond targets and Art of Regalia spam and Zir. I think Zir is very scary now, super scary, and I think it's definitely Lionar's gonna be a force to be reckoned with. Like, I can't say that enough. It's gonna be really strong, but that's why Control Magmar is gonna be so great.
Scientist?
I'm gonna throw out a Dark Horse deck. Not what I think is gonna be like oppressive, but I think Creep Abyssian actually has a place in the meta now. Because Spectral Blade is going to control the early game as effectively as it has before, and now you don't have to deal with so many things you had to answer as before. You're going to use Repulsor Beast, you're going to use Demonic Lure, and the only problem is going to be like how consistently can you draw into multiple Shadow Novas. That's going to sort of be like the downfall of the deck. But like Abyssal Juggernaut, as far as 4-drops goes, like it used to be a joke, but now it's actually like okay.
Not bad. It's almost a Hailstone.
Yeah, it is. It's almost a Hailstone Golem, and which is sadly the standard now. But and it has a useful effect if you're playing a Shadow Creep deck. Right of the Undervault, like it's one of those cards that I still feel is a trap card. I think it's not good, but like if you can find a way for it to be right, then it can
Pause.
be really, really
One
powerful.
second.
So,
In case
yeah.
anybody's confused, just 1 second. Sorry,
Yeah.
Nick. In case he's not making any Yu-Gi-Oh reference, because that's what I thought at first when he told me that, like the trap card thing. Just in case you're confused by what he said.
Oh, I've never played any games besides Duelyst.
Yeah,
basically.
I
Yeah.
at first I thought, is he talking about Yu-Gi-Oh? What's happening
Yeah.
here? Like trap card. What Nick means is that that card is a card that people believe is going to be good, but it's going to be bad, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the tempo loss is going to be too big. But what I'm imagining in my mind is like when you actually play it is you somehow find a way to utilize like Darkfire Sacrifice to cheat out early threats to sort of push your agenda a little bit, and then at some point you go Demonic Lure or Repulsor Beast as your like tempo play to sort of hit the reset button on 7 or 8 mana, and then play a Rite of the Undervault on the same turn, and then refill your hand, and now you've basically reached parity for the most sense. But now you're playing with 6 cards again, which is quite rare from my experiences running into those higher mana costs. And yes, you are going second, but you're hopefully drawing into like your second round of tempo plays. So like we talked about before, it's a big disadvantage to like once you hit the bigger mana points just to be playing second every turn. But the point is, once you've refilled your hand, you hopefully have the options where you can now like they play a big threat and then you demonic lure it and play your big threat, and now you're on the forefront. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the scenario I see. You have to like the way I see Rite of the Undervault and that concept of the deck playing out and being useful. I think it still has a ways to go, but creep as a concept I think has gotten stronger. So I'm interested to see if people can build something interesting.
One question, Nick. Do you think, like you've mentioned this card numerous times, do you think demonic lure is going to be very prevalent now, like very important?
I think it will be important, again, because if you're like just looking at a bunch of stats, then Demonic Lure is a pretty good answer. If you time it right, it's like that same soft removal where I think Repulsor Beast will be very useful. Yeah. And then it synergizes well with Creep, it always has. And as a whole, Abyssinian doesn't have a lot of, answers. Like, Ritual Banishing is a card I'm still like very
too big minions,
in a lot of
right?
senses. Yeah. Like unless I have a Sarlacc on the field, I'm like, oh, Ritual Banishing, just like I feel like I'm stabbing myself when I play it, but because I'm destroying my own minion, right? And now you're not going to have a lot of little minions to destroy. It's like you have one big minion, and it's like, well, I just can't let this other thing live, so it's like shoot.
Right.
So Demonic Lure is going to be going to be the go-to answer for now.
I'm going to use the exact same reasoning you gave me. I'm going to apply it to a different card. Sand Trap from Vitruvian. Because it synergizes with Star's Fury. It for example, if you Sand Trap a Dancing Blade, for example, that's a very strong play. For 2 mana, you're kind of forgetting about that minion because you don't choose to go near it, regardless of how your opponent positions. So I think, for the exact reasons you said, I think Sand Trap is also gonna be like very underlooked at first.
Will be very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's gonna compete with a lot of spells though, which is the problem. But I mean, it's good when you have like with the main issue is that there's too many cards you want to use. I think that's better than having like these staple decks which are very similar to each other. So yeah.
Well, as for my part, I'm gonna stick with what I was alluding to before. Be wary, fellow players. There is a scary artifact Vitruvian list coming out in this meta. I'm warning you guys ahead of time. It's coming. I think
hide your kids,
Vitruvian,
hide your wife.
Somehow the problem with Artifact Vitruvian before, and I will continue to say this until the end of time, was consistency. Okay, this was a big issue. But now, with the way draw works, the power of Vitruvian's card draw mechanisms can really be harnessed to accumulate those cards that allow you to practically OTK your opponent relatively consistently. And I'm going to say this, there is a chance Osirix is going to see play. That is my prediction.
I can see it.
I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding.
I can see it.
I'm not even kidding. Even as a distraction,
like
and
in
if
these
you don't deal with it,
if these persons
It's-
in game in which you have 3 cards in your hand and you're like top decking and stuff, you get an Ozarisk, it's GG. Like that thing has 8 attack, flying, and when it dies, it gives you 2 artifacts. That's really so much value. Like it's ridiculous. I don't know. I think
it used to be too slow. That was a big problem from before. It was too slow. The effect is cool, right?
Is it too slow now though? Is it slow now though?
But
like
now,
I don't see it being slow now at all.
I think that if your opponent deals with it, unless they silence and hard removal it, or they trade into it, it's both a distraction and it immediately equips 2 artifacts, which means you are much closer to needing basically a Maelstrom in 1 tier to kill from pretty much any life total 20 and below. If, however, they don't deal with it, it has flying, it's got 8 attack, it's scary enough, and when it does pop, again, you're thinning out the deck by 2 artifacts. Yes, it's going to be more beneficial against, say, late game heavy decks, but I think that there is a chance people are going to try this card out and might even find a way for it to work. That's going to be my prediction. Okay, well, guys, I think that wraps up everything we had on our agenda. We just want to say thanks again for taking out the time to join us today. It's always great having discussion with fellow players who really think about the game and enjoy it and want to try new things out. So thank you, Mogwai. Thank you, Scientist, so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, guys. This was really fun. Like if I wasn't doing this, I would be just building decks right now. As soon as I stop, I'm either gonna talk Duelyst or play Duelyst. Like I don't care anything. Like these days, it's just gonna be that. It's insane. Like so many things. Like you talk about Ozarks now. Now I want to fucking try Ozarks. Like it's too much. It's too much. Ugh.
And listen to everybody checking out the show. Please be sure to look in the description. We will be putting in links for Team Wars. Every Sunday, a bunch of teams are playing against each other in a league, a weekly league, with very exciting games using the Archon Team League format. It's played on Sunday evenings, EU time. I think it's 3 p.m. PST. So be sure to check that out. There'll be links in the description, and we will be recording our second faction locked podcast on Vanar this Sunday, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Am I for that? I'm for
it was
that,
a pleasure. Yeah. This is always
yeah.
is really love what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
So glad.
Oh,
to
so
Okay.
I'm for the Vanar podcast.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'll see you again.
Surprise.
Thanks
Surprise.
for having me.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
We'll catch everyone later. Thanks
Yeah.
for checking us out.
All right.
Laters.